spirituality has become an MLM,
Oh,
right?
yeah, 100%. You're teaching others so that they can Dunning-Kruger it into being a coach.
Hello, this is Aster, and welcome to the first episode of Mercurial Musings, a excuse to interview people that I adore, people that inspire me, and just all around helping you get to know people in the wellness industry in the DMV. In today's episode, I thought it would be appropriate to introduce the cast of Three Cup Circle, the writers that you have been reading. We are kicking this off by exploring our metaphysical reality with the co-founders, Nico and Vesper. Nico is a pharmacist and Reiki master who values the idea of balance and the intersection of scientific and metaphysical healing. Vesper is a modern-day philosopher who specializes in epistemology, the study of knowledge, how we know things, why we don't know things. Today, we are talking about Reiki as a system of balance, its history, and the different ways we practice this not-so-ancient modality. To start this conversation, I just want to set the backdrop for how we all got into this practice. So if each of you could briefly introduce yourself and explain how you got into Reiki, or rather how Reiki found you in this life.
Hey, I'm Nico. I am the Reiki master in question. I actually found out about Reiki at a very vulnerable time in my life, and it really carried me through. This was back in 2013, and I did my Reiki 1 levels pretty much immediately after in August of 2013. So, which means I've been at this for about 13 years now, and I pursued most of my levels through the Reiki Center of Greater Washington under David, who is a wonderful teacher. And so, yeah, I've been weaving this into my life from that day, and it has become really a vital part of who I am and what I do.
Hi, I'm Vesper. I am less involved with the Reiki side of what we do, but I did get my Reiki 1 certification and attunement from Nico's teacher, and it was a really great experience. I do help out sometimes with our Reiki when Nico needs backup. Once you've been attuned and started the process, I think it's really interesting that you don't have to necessarily continue forward through the levels to become a Reiki master teacher. Like some people are called to do like Nico was, but you can get a lot of benefit out of just doing any level of attunement or any level of study. So I appreciate sort of what it's brought me at the level that I'm at, and I might go deeper into it at some point. But also, as we're going to talk about, there's a lot of interesting philosophical concepts and just sort of spiritual ideas and things that come from studying and also practicing Reiki that are really core to what we do, even if all three of us aren't aren't
actively practicing, just as a sole Reiki practitioner. Like that's kind of, even if we aren't all firmly seated in that niche or choose to use that title, we all experience and use Reiki in our lives.
And Reiki, for me, it was really just an introductory on how to listen to myself more. Really, I only got my Reiki 1 and 2. I haven't pursued my Reiki master. I didn't really vibe with my original teacher in that way. And then I ended up moving anyway. But when I moved, it really unlocked my relationship with land, and it unlocked a different healing modality. So Reiki visited me. I still use it as the foundation for my practice, but it has evolved over time. Reiki, for me, is really just this universal energy that we all have access to. And I think that we'll get into that a little bit today on how Reiki can help you unlock deeper relationship with something that's more authentic to you. But before we get into that, I really want to talk about something that honestly inspired this episode of this podcast. Nico and I recently held a Reiki 1 class, but I was listening to some of the things that she was saying. And one of the things that really I feel like needs to be talked about in our current metaphysical reality is how different the branches of Reiki are when you compare the original Eastern practice and the Western practice that was brought over in the early 1900s. So Could you talk to us a little bit about the differences between East and West and maybe some of the history that is tied up in there so that listeners who may be new to Reiki or for people who've been practicing Reiki who want to refresh can hear about some of the context of what we will be talking about here in a moment?
Yeah, so absolutely. What I think is an important piece of information to start out with is how darn unregulated Reiki is. And I will stand on my soapbox and I will talk about this all day long. There is no one true Reiki, possibly because this is a system of energy work and this is a system of connection that resists standardization. Perhaps it's because we're all meant to kind of form our own individual relationships with it. But what I will say is that there is no accreditation process for becoming a Reiki master, for becoming a Reiki student, for, I don't know, creating your own wild ass spinoff of Reiki and then monetizing it and raking in cash. Like, there's literally nothing to stop you from doing that. So that's important to know. And I think the other thing that is important about the origins and the path of Reiki is that there was a split. So Reiki originated in Japan in the early 1900s. I will say anybody who kind of off the cuff says, it's this ancient practice, the practice of energy work and energy manipulation is indeed incredibly ancient and can be found in literally all cultures throughout the world. Reiki itself was, I would say, visited upon Dr. Mikao Usui in, again, early 1900s. We don't even have an exact date that he had his vision that he brought Reiki into the world, but that's where the lineage starts, right? So he began to take students. And so if you enter into a place where Reiki is practiced or taught, you may see someone's lineage chart up on the wall. Lineage mapping is kind of as close to accreditation as you can come. People like to chart the path of like how they are connected to Usui Sensei. And what's interesting is that there is a very definite split because Reiki started in Japan and one of Hayashi Sensei's students came over to the US. And that was Takata Sensei. So Takata Sensei exported Reiki for the West and specifically for the United States. And I think that something very interesting happened in the not commodification of Reiki, but that was kind of the end result. Because what happened was Takata Sensei was faced with this conundrum of how to translate this practice between cultures, and not just so that Westerners could understand it, but so that Westerners could value it in as close as a fashion to Eastern culture as possible. So the question became, how do we make Westerners care about this? And the answer was money. Of course, the answer was money. So whenever Takata Sensei decided to become a student of Hayashi Sensei, it was very high cost for her. She ended up selling her home. She ended up moving to Japan to study under him and basically worked unpaid in his clinic. It was very much like an ongoing trial of endurance to prove that she like really, really wanted to learn this and she really, really wanted to have this skill. And so when it came to questions of not only how do we make Westerners understand this prodigious gift that is being given to them, but how do we make them value it? The answer, of course, was money. So for a class of Reiki 1, it was roughly approximate to the amount that she sold her house for. So to make the Westerners care that they were really actually getting something really good out of this class, this lesson, and this practice, she made it an incredibly high cost, which I thought was very, very interesting. There's also some questions of how she translated it for a Western audience in the same of, it's kind of like a localization. Like if you've ever consumed any sort of media that comes from another country, there's translation and then there's localization. Translation is just basically what did that person say? Localization is seating it within a context of the translated country. What's an example of that?
So, for example, if you're localizing something that was originally in Japanese, there are honorific tags that are put at the end of people's names in Japanese to tell you things about your relationship to that person you're speaking to. And we don't have that concept as much here. We do have titles, but they don't serve the exact same purpose. So a localizer has to choose either to port that in and explain it somehow in the text, or a more localizing decision would be to cut those entirely and find a different way of getting that information across if it's important. Same thing with like name order. Like in Japanese, the family name comes before the personal name. And we have the opposite. And so if you are localizing something, you're likely to reverse those names if you want a Western audience to understand what someone's first name is, what somebody's last name is. It can get even more involved about concepts like our school system is structured differently. So are you going to say first grade, or are you going to say the equivalent in that culture, or the age range? Like, you have to find ways of making those things fit while also fitting seamlessly into the dialogue, which in this case, it's not a dialogue, but it is still fitting it into the concept of like you are teaching a skill. So how much of Japanese culture do you want to have to educate people about versus how much do you want to localize these concepts so that it's something that is within the framework that the Western audience is going to get? But then also, are you losing something? Like, sometimes you are losing something in localization, even just translation wise. If you are losing the honorifics, you're losing information.
Absolutely. We are diehard in terms of consuming entertainment from Japan. We are diehard honorifics fans because we believe that it imparts a kind of information that is just lost. And actually, a perfect example of this is, you may have heard me refer to Dr. Usui versus Usui Sensei. And what's interesting is that Usui Sensei actually means teacher. So like if you have Japanese school children, it's like, Mikaro Sensei, like that means teacher, my teacher. But the way that it's actually localized, not translated into American, I almost said, the way that
Well, it is.
It is, right? It is. The way that it's actually localized into American is doctor, because teacher doesn't carry the same weight. It's that they were trying to impart this kind of authority. It wasn't just that he was a teacher. Any old person can be a teacher, or so Americans believe. It was that he was a doctor of this energy work. So he was more official, and we should definitely pay attention to him and care about what he says. So that is the difference between like translation, localization. And so with a practice that is so incredibly ingrained in specifics of Japanese culture, it can get really sticky if a Japanese person is trying to kind of rewrite or translate or localize the story, the values, the setting, etc., in a way that she believes would actually catch Americans' attention and make them care. And I think the one that always sticks out to me is that she added Christianity in like Bonito Flakes. Like it was like sprinkles. Christianity was everywhere. He was like a teacher at a Christian school. So it was like, this aligns with my values. Yes. Americans can care about Christian things, probably to lessen the flavor of Buddhism and Shintoism that, as we will find out, is pretty vital to an understanding of Reiki.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. It reminds me of like how much can get lost in translation.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think that where I want to go with this now is, what are the differences that you notice between Eastern Reiki, Western Reiki, and does that affect your practice?
My goodness, this question has multiple layers. But what I would start with is obviously the myth that has changed. The myth was literally westernized for Western approval. So in doing so, Takata Sensei stripped a lot of the very like cultural specificity out of myth of Reiki. So again, like I said, this whole thing is very unregulated. So it really is a question of what story were you told? There is no Reiki textbook. It's very much transmitted orally and transmitted by contact. So the story that you got was the story that your teacher got. And in doing so, the practice and the story kind of changes incrementally, little by little. I will say that the Eastern branch of Reiki that basically stayed in Japan is much, much, much more secretive. It is much more hierarchical. It is much more regimented. It's not like you can go into a salon or a shop in Japan and be like, "Can I have a Reiki treatment, please?" Like it's so on a completely different level, and that has to do with some of the kind of secret society things that some of the organizers of Reiki had to do in order to stay underground, to stay protected from anti-cult laws in World War II. So that's
Mm.
very, very interesting. So it's very, again, very secretive, very below ground. In contrast to McDonald's America, Reiki over here is very available. And I do think that in part that is because it has been split entirely from any kind of spiritual context. And that is, it's both important, it is as important as you make it, right? Because Reiki itself claims to be non-religious. It claims to be compatible with any sort of, I would say, world system, like I'm building a fantasy novel. It claims to be compatible with any religion, any kind of frame of thought. But I do not think that that line of thinking allows you to appreciate the true depths of Reiki and what it can give you, where it can take you, where it has been. So anyway, I think that the thing that I want to highlight the most is that in America, in, again, highly unregulated, Reiki is treated like a tool. It is treated not like a party trick, but it's treated like a skill set. And so after you are attuned forever. There is no reason for reattunement once the energy is with you, once you have kind of synced up to that frequency, it is with you forever. That is such a gift. But there's also this feeling of, okay, you've received this gift, what are you going to do with it? And to the point where in many advanced Reiki courses, there is a little section at the back of your booklet that describes to you how to set up a Reiki practice. And part of it is like, of course, you learned this thing. What are you going to do with it? Well, of course, you're going to spread the gift. You're going to go help people. But it's also capitalism. There is this built-in assumption that once you learn Reiki, it is for other people. You learn it to help others. And that is, as I have found, not the same in Japan. The kind of original strain, Jikiden, that was more on Hayashi Sensei's side of things, it is so much less about giving your skills to others, which is, again, sense. It's not accessible over there. It's not public. It's not easy. Over there, it's so much more about your own personal mystical experience with the energy. There's really not there's definitely training on how to read others' energy. It's far more intuitively based and you learn all the things, but it's less about being a service to others than it is about expanding your relationship with yourself. And in that way, it is highly, highly Buddhist. It's incredibly meditative. And whenever I started kind of sticking my nose into what could be considered like Jikiden flavored things, Eastern Branch flavored things, it was so much more about meditation. It was so much more about going within instead of, this is how you remove a blockage from a patient in 3 steps. And that just fascinated me because for a majority of my career, I mean, I've been busy. I had to go through pharmacy school. And while I did help a lot of my classmates through pharmacy school, everyone was so tapped out. Everyone was so tired. Everyone just needed a little bit more energy. Part of me felt this weird lingering guilt of like, why am I not healing more people? Why did I not set up a Reiki practice and using this beautiful gift that I have to its full potential? Instead, I used it as self-care. Instead, I gave myself energy so that I could keep going and really used it as self-soothing, self-care, first aid, basically.
Mm.
And the whole time I was kind of like, you're doing this wrong. But once I figured out that it was actually the way that it is done, it more in the Eastern branch of things, it's kind of validated me and it made it kind of sense that I was like, oh my goodness, no, this entire time I really have been investing in my personal mystical relationship with this energy. And that's okay. I haven't been like cheating anybody or shortchanging anybody. When everybody in the West, as soon as they learn Reiki, almost the second question is, well, how are you going to monetize it? When are you going to open up a Reiki practice? And now that just makes my fingernails curl.
And I think it's really interesting because it's not just Reiki. This taps into a larger conversation that we're having a lot about every spiritual practice. We can't escape capitalism. We live in America. It's even worse now because of the cost of living crisis. And obviously, we're not shaming anyone for trying to make a living off any way that they can.
Oh, heck no.
And that the way that our society is set up, part of our energetic exchange is through money. So whereas in other cultures, there might have been a different kind of bartering or energetic exchange in exchange for these services, now we have formalized things into being in exchange for money. But before we even...
And Usui Sensei is okay with that, by the way.
Yes, yeah. It's not like some practices where there's like questions about monetizing it. Like this was intended to be at least sometimes monetized.
Yes.
But before any of those questions, there is the fundamental question of what are these practices for? And I think we, as like a spiritual community in general, are not really grappling with that question. We teach people tarot and we provide tarot services. We teach people Reiki. We provide Reiki services. We also do purely spiritual, like rituals and things like that. And something that we keep coming back to again and again and again is like, what are seekers seeking us out to learn this for? And so much of the material out there is, as we were describing the Reiki materials, it is intended to help you set up a practice. It's intended to help you set up a business. It is so immediately about doing this to others, for others, to help, but also very explicitly to help for money, to help for a job, to help as your reason for existing.
No, spirituality has become an MLM, right?
Yeah, 100%. You're teaching others so that they can Dunning-Kruger it into being a coach, a spiritual coach, who can then teach others, who can then attempt to teach others. And where is the actual knowledge?
Exactly.
Right.
And again, what is the knowledge for? So it's like, even if you are doing a good job of teaching people and passing this on, which that's a whole separate question for Reiki and everything else, these practices were originally, and now few of them have been passed down in their original form from some ancient practice, right? But a lot of them have their roots in older practices. And they were originally for your own development. They were for your own seeking of knowledge. They were for self-care, but beyond that, getting in tune with the truth of the universe, getting deep into questions about our nature and our interconnectedness and the sacredness of all life, and going into the underworld and coming back out with new knowledge. That is the purpose of these spiritual practices. And to completely strip them of that role in your own life is to strip them of their power, to strip yourself of the opportunity for that growth, but also to make yourself a worse practitioner.
Yeah.
And I can't speak necessarily to Reiki to say that the Western versus the Eastern way of doing it is better. Like, that's not the question that we're trying to get at, but there is an approach to it that is so clearly prioritizing some things over other things. And you are losing something in that prioritization. And you are losing, as a practitioner, you're losing how powerful these tools can be for you. And also, we're losing some of what that can then do in other people's lives. Your actual practice for your clients and your community members is going to be stronger if it's all taking place within the framework of other spiritual beliefs, other meaning-making practices, the things that allow these tools to be understood in their proper context and not just be a skill set that you've carved out to package and sell.
It's also a question of like holistic healing, right? Because one thing that I really value in Reiki is that it is based on this idea of balance and this idea that your body wants to, let's say, vibrate at a certain frequency. That frequency is the one that is healthiest for it. If you start getting out of balance, there are going to be blockages and buildup. And it is less about visiting a Reiki practitioner to get a block removed, like that's gonna solve anything, because if you don't change your behavior, if you don't change your ways of thinking, if you don't change your ways of being, that blockage is not the illness. It is a symptom of the imbalance or the quote unquote dis-ease. So it's like we do valuable things in identifying and being like, hey, have you been having problems in this area of your life? And like kind of starting this conversation about what might be making you feel imbalanced. But baby girl, the blockage is not the problem. The way of life is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so this kind of commodification of Reiki leads you to go to have a block removed and think that that's it. That's where the conversation ends. So it's this holistic question of what all is around the blockage and basically attending to every aspect of ourselves in our quest for healing. And in that way, I think that some people are taking it kind of more medicalized. Like it's like, okay, we have a tumor. We removed the tumor.
Exactly.
And then we're fixed. It's like, okay, but what
It's
was
like going to a doctor's appointment.
It's like going to a doctor's appointment. And it's like doctor's appointments are good. Please, everybody, go to your yearly doctor's appointment.
Yes, please.
Please. However, this is serving another purpose. This is serving to kind of look into the subtleties of where other imbalances and other diseases exist in your life and giving you information and perspective on if you want to change that thing.
It's an energetic compass, and
Yes.
you are the one that has to go on the journey.
Exactly.
That's something I say at the end of every Reiki session that I do is we can align you and spend time together doing this energetic work, but the moment you walk out that door, if you don't make different choices, you're going to be back here next month, like expecting something different.
And unfortunately, some people are banking on you coming back next month because you're a returning patient. You're a returning client and you're going to pay them again. So not saying that like it's a total sham or anything, but some people are relying on you to come back again. Ideally, the goal is to help them realize things about themselves so that they see you less frequently, not more frequently. And that commodification, that tie into money and sometimes celebrityism, it can really fog up a person's priorities as to why they're doing the work that they're doing.
And I think that's what's so interesting about spiritual healing. What is valuable about spiritual healing is different from what is valuable about Western or like more scientific healing. There are, of course, questions of lifestyle and questions of long-term changes that you need to answer in Western medicine, but a lot of Western medicine is around specific science-based interventions to help you address a specific symptom. And if you're lucky, they're able to give you some counseling about lifestyle changes. But broadly, outside of psychiatry, they're not really there to help you learn about yourself. That's just not what that does. And so spiritual healing is there not to be a one-off or a multi-off intervention that addresses a specific symptom you're having. It's really about helping you learn about yourself. It's helping you be on the path. We are all on a path. And it's like pointing out that you're on a path in the first place, and then helping you find the contours of that path and helping you walk it easier and answering questions about it and helping you think through challenges on that path. And that is like an evolving thing. But that is the value that like spiritual healing can give you. And that is really how we should be thinking about it. And the more we try to turn it into this McDonald's, like showing up to order something. And it's tempting to do that because it can sometimes give you more legitimacy in our society, because the more you can make it look like medicine, the more you can make it look like science, the more people will take it seriously. But you're really trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It isn't science. It isn't medicine. It is healing. It's a different kind. And our understanding of it and our interaction with it should really be honoring what it is and not trying to turn it into something else. Because for any benefit that you're getting from it, you're also losing aspects of what it is actually good at.
So this is why when some of my clients that may be listening, when you ask me, when do I come back? When is the next time I come to you? My answer is always when it feels correct, when you're ready for a new tool, when we're especially in Reiki, when you're ready for a new breathing technique, when you're ready for a new form or style of meditation, or you just feel like you need a tune-up and want direction on what actions to take next. There is no prescriptive how often you should be doing this. Honestly, in an ideal world, you would learn the foundations of Reiki 1 and give this to yourself daily as a devotional practice, as a way to remind yourself that you are in the driver's seat and that you are in control of your story and your healing and your relationship to this beautiful world that we get to live in. I think that this is a really great opportunity to switch the conversation to, we talked about how the Western form of Reiki really made itself its own thing, which I think kind of gives us permission to take Reiki and create our own relationship to it directly. And so, do either of you have advice on how to make Reiki your own or how to implement your personal dance with the universe into your practice?
Absolutely. 13 years is a long time to be co-creating energy work with a specific modality. But one thing I will say, just a little story that I want to share about, again, no regulation, because my very first Reiki 1 class, I've actually taken it twice, but my very first Reiki 1 class, the knowledge that was given to me, so let's keep it vague so that Usui Sensei doesn't get mad in in his heavenly bower, but there is this particular symbol that can be taught to you at level 1. Probably shouldn't, but it was, once again, no regulation, and it involves a spiral. And what was interesting was that the first time that I learned this symbol, it is technically backwards because it was the original symbol was passed down through multiple teachers, multiple students, and it happened to go through a few practitioners who were pagan adjacent. And so Wiccans, pagans, we kind of have strong feelings about clockwise and counterclockwise. So clockwise is like forward momentum opening, it is active, and counterclockwise is like closing, it is shutting down, it's drawing out. And so this symbol, originally from Usui Sensei's time, it included a counterclockwise spiral. But this teacher, somewhere along the line, decided that she didn't really like that. That didn't really vibe with, I believe that she was into fae magic, who knows, but that didn't really vibe with her whole pagan adjacent feeling. Now, normally, I would have, if I were that person, I would be like, well, this is my personal preference for doing this symbol. This is how it makes the most sense to me. I wouldn't pass it on to my students as gospel, but this lady apparently did. She was like, I fixed it. I'm like, Barbara, no one asked you to fix this. God damn it. So when I learned it, it was clockwise because that's the way that it felt best to this lady. And then when I actually started learning the symbols as they were presented by, the recipient of this information, I was like, why is it backwards? And it was a little while before I could kind of wrap my head around doing it quote unquote backwards. And I would say that they both work, but also the ways that I have used all of these symbols daily throughout my life, like they are going to change. You're going to adapt to them and they're going to adapt to you. And it's just this dance of finding out where you can bring this energy into your life. And that's actually something that we want to do a course on later, of like Reiki for tarot readers, Reiki for masseuses, right? I mean, if you
massage therapists.
Massage therapists. Yeah, over the years, I mean, being a witch, mostly Reiki it is one of those underlying practices that helps me get the energy moving, period. Everything that I do, pretty much, whether I'm speaking, doing like a speaking engagement, whether I'm doing divination, whether I'm doing pendulum readings, I always open up my channel because for me, that is the most accessible avenue of energy. And once that energy starts flowing, I can tap in, I can tune in, and everything is just so much smoother from there. I don't know that Usui ever thought that this energy source or that this energy access point would be used for drawing cards or doing kind of more psychically oriented things, but it's there. And it works, and that's how I use it.
I mean, I even give Reiki to my cards. Like
if I feel
like it's been too much for their
little constitution.
Yeah. Like maybe if I'm at a party or an event and I feel like, okay, I've read for like 10 people in a row, like let's give a quick cleanse, let's give a quick clear. And I definitely don't think Usui Sensei would have thought to even teach that, right?
Go to your mahjong tiles.
Hey, I mean, it worked last night.
I want to, obviously, I have a different relationship to Reiki as less of a primary practitioner, but I do think it's interesting to think about, especially as a white Western person, there is so much overlap in our spiritual practices that we are trying to bring back, reconnect with other cultures, because our ancestors, and when I say our, I'm obviously speaking to like a specific strand of white people in America. So I want to be very clear about that. Our ancestors and their practices were very real and they were very there, and our connection to them has been completely severed by the invention of whiteness. It took away our connection to our specific ancestors and our specific cultures. And I think there is this hunger to reconnect with those that can sometimes go awry if, instead of trying to reconnect with the universal truth of them and reconnect with the parts that are still echoing in our memory, we want to just take existing closed practices from other cultures and be like, that's mine, I'm doing that now because I don't have my own. And I don't think that that's obviously not something that's happening with Reiki, because it was intentionally created in the modern era to be exported and taught. And we talked a little bit about the differences, but it was never a closed practice in that way.
It was never like you have to be a certain XYZ in order to inherit this energy. It was like literally, more people need to know about this energy. Go forth and teach.
But I think that something interesting that you can draw from even something that's so accessible as Reiki is that there are truth claims to Reiki. Like, Reiki is not just a skill practice that you're learning, it's also a set of beliefs that you are being taught. And it can be so universal that we don't necessarily think of those beliefs as beliefs that you have to accept. But like, in order to do Reiki or believe in Reiki or I guess just even think about Reiki, you need to accept that there are energy centers in the body. You need to accept that those energy centers connect to various aspects of your psychology and your life. You need to accept that you can have an impact on the flow of energy through those things, and that the flow of energy through those centers changes how you feel. You need to accept that there's a universal energy source outside of you that you can have some access to. There's a lot more than that, but those are like the basics, right? And so there are beliefs there. And those beliefs, if you universalize them enough, you will find them across cultures. All of us have ancestors who believed in some version of these things. And I think there's value in getting at the specificity of those beliefs, but there's also a lot of value in connecting to the core sort of universalness of those beliefs. So I would say, more than making Reiki my own, what I like about being around it and working with it is just that reconnection to the universality of those beliefs. And not to go too deep into my special interest, but one thing that strikes me a lot when we were talking about the specificity of like the philosophy behind Reiki, especially Eastern Reiki, about searching for balance in yourself, and that you will feel better when you find a balance of energies, and that a lot of things that are feeling bad are about an imbalance of energies, and that it's not just getting rid of an energy block, but it's also like doing habits and creating virtues in your life that will lead you to long-term balance. It's a lifelong journey question. And that reflects to me a lot of what I've learned about ancient Greek philosophy, which is one of my ancestors.
Hyper focuses.
And also, as a philosopher,
lineages.
yes. But, to be able to connect that to some of my own ancestors, and they come from completely different places. They never had any contact with each other, but they came to this same sort of view on health and balance and energy, that virtues are created by habitual actions, and so like energetic balance is created by habitual actions and habitual balance, and that it's something that you need to pursue, and that even the process of going inside and learning about yourself was obviously, if you know anything about any Greek philosophy, that's kind of the one thing everybody knows, is that it's know thyself. Like, basically they created what we understand to be philosophy, that pursuit of knowledge of the self and that pursuit of perfection of the self. Perfection is kind of a tricky word in Western culture, but ignoring all of the potential baggage you might be bringing in, pursuing improving the self.
Yourself. Not even an idealized self, but yourself.
Yeah. That was sort of their primary interest in these pursuits, not meeting some kind of external goal or being able to turn these outwards as a practice. And so, yeah, it's just really meaningful for me that you can make those kinds of connections.
Across cultures, across time.
Yeah, that weren't intended. The ancient practices came from very different wells, but they were getting at these same sort of universal truths.
And I think that ties into this conversation that we had in Reiki 1, which is about this idea of Reiki being a vessel, a container. It can hold multiple philosophies in one thing because really it's connecting to something older. Reiki isn't ancient, but it does have these ties to ancient energy channeling.
Universal source. I mean, Reiki means like universal energy or intelligent energy. It is everything that perfuses everything. And so this idea, whether it's great spirit, whether it is, God, whether it is what have you, like this idea that there is this other force that is hopefully full of love, that we have a much more fulfilling life when we have access to it. That is the oldest truth that humanity has ever nurtured.
And I really do view Reiki energy as the ultimate mercurial energy. It is what connects multiple things. So, for example, I know you and I both incorporate the chakra system into our Reiki practice as a way to identify and communicate with our clients using a language that they may understand, or it eases the
burden of translation.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that to Japan, like Shintoism is probably playing a huge role here, and that's why the elements and like working with land works so well with Reiki. There's just a lot of really beautiful overlap that Reiki provides. So what is like one thing? We're coming up to our time right now. So if there's one last thing or one really important thing that our listeners could benefit from, what would you say that would be?
I think that I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about white people. No, but in all seriousness, I think that, to echo what Vess said, we are in an era where Caucasians are very hungry for and specifically an ancestral practice that really has been denied to us. We have been bleached, if you will. We have been denied access to a lot of the connections that our ancestors had or may have had. And there is a temptation to kind of, to culturally appropriate or to jump feet first into somebody else's practice. And I mean, there's so much to be learned. There are truths that you can resonate with. We believe in past lives. Like, there's so many reasons why you might really, really resonate with a practice and with the culture that surrounds it. But I think that an important thing to understand is that all of these practices came into being in a certain context. Usually that context is a cultural context, and it is really, truly, deeply important, and you can deepen your understanding of that practice by understanding the context. There's actually a Japanese word that's kotodama, which basically means like the magic in the words. And it's this idea that there is this immovable, vital magic that exists in the words as they are spoken in their native language that cannot be recaptured by translation. So for this reason, I know the 5 Reiki precepts in English, and that's how I learned it. But then I went and I learned the 5 Reiki precepts in Japanese because of this idea of kotodama, that there is this magic that cannot be replicated through translation. And there's so many more other concepts that I have yet to learn that really give me this very precious insight into the incredibly dense and meaning-rich language that this practice originated in. However,
so we should resist the urge to strip these practices completely of that context. And we should, as we've said, like research into that context, get to know it, try to improve your relationship to it. But also, you don't have access to that context. You aren't a Japanese person in the 1900s. So as much as, as we've said, Reiki is not a closed practice, but there are obviously more intense examples of actual closed practices where you should, if you find value in learning about these practices, you should learn about them the ways that practitioners allow you to learn about them. And you should deepen, if they do, and you should deepen your context around them, specifically, especially things like yoga that have been completely stripped of their cultural context. That's a whole different topic. But those are good examples of ways that you can respectfully learn about that context, but you also have to recognize but you never have real personal one-to-one access to that context. So for the practices that you can and are allowed to and can respectfully, like Reiki, take out of that context, you have on the one hand, learn about the context. On the other hand, understand that you are porting that practice into your own personal context. And there is a personal context. And that context can't just be capitalism. So whatever belief system you have, if you're a pagan like us, if you're a Christian, if you're a humanist, whatever set of spiritual or philosophical beliefs or political beliefs, however you're moving through the world, you do have a context. And the only way to really get the most out of these practices and the only way to really honor these practices the way that I know you probably want to, I hope everybody's setting out with that intention, is to think about the ways that these practices can grow roots within your own personal context. Because everything should be taking place in that. And that's a way to avoid stealing other people's context. It's a way to avoid disrespecting other people's context. And it's a way to avoid just moving through the world and doing harm by not thinking about how we're interacting with these practices. And also not just letting your entire existence be taken over by this hegemonic capitalistic society that we unfortunately are stuck in.
I think this is a very important conversation, especially with the state of the spiritual union right now and how people are unfortunately being furloughed and let go from their jobs, and they're reaching in desperation for a way to survive. And it is an overwhelming time. And I think that it's important to remember that a lot of these practices that are gaining in popularity right now originally are a way for you to interview and know the self and get to know what is authentic to you. So really think about that energy that you're holding within yourself and asking yourself, am I doing this to survive or am I doing this to thrive? I want to thank both of you for being here. Thank you so much for joining me in on this conversation. I'm excited to introduce you to a lot of brilliant minds that live in our area. And for those of you that are listening for the first time, make sure that you go and subscribe to @3cupcircle on Instagram, @AstraSaluna on Instagram, as well as joining the Beehive, which is where this is being hosted. So thank you to Beehive as well. One last thing, I do have an announcement for Nico.
If you are interested in learning Reiki from myself and Aster, we are having an introductory Reiki 1 2-day course over July 11th and 12th.
If you're looking for a way to open up your channel to see what is waiting for you and your authenticity on the other side of that channel, you can either send me a DM, email us at 3cupcircle@gmail.com, or find any other way to reach out to us. Definitely, if you're following along on the Instagrams, you will know when that course is announced and when it is for sale.
We hope to see you there.
Thank you again so much. Next episode, we are talking with a local mortician and artist to discuss the overlap between death and art. I hope to see you there.
I love Claudia.